Today, I want you to imagine along with me that you are sitting in a restaurant. At a nearby table sits two U.S. Navy SEALs. Now imagine they are talking openly about their day at work. In reality, this would never happen. Clearly, these two men would not speak openly and candidly about a mission in a public place. However, for the sake of today's lesson, let's continue with this bit of fiction. Let's pretend that one of those men was giving the other a list of things that were to be done the next time they went into a conflict. They were talking freely about what needs to happen to the enemy and how to secure mission success.
Welcome to the Encounter Life podcast. This episode is part of the Pastor's Desk series. In this series, Pastor Richie will share bits of wit, wisdom, and insight. For those of you that know him, you know that he loves to tell stories. He loves to bring his listeners along as he crafts simple and relatable stories to illustrate spiritual truths. Be sure to hang around for the conclusion of Pastor's Desk.
The Apostle Paul and the younger preacher Timothy were not Navy SEALs. However, they were warriors in a spiritual battle. I am reminded of Paul's word to the Corinthian church. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. He instructs the Ephesians to put on the full armor of God. Paul writes in his first letter to Timothy, I am giving you this command in keeping with the prophecies once made about you, so that by recalling them you may fight the battle well. Now, some might suggest that this is all just symbolism, that Paul is just using an analogy to make his point. Years ago, we would sing a Christian hymn entitled, Onward, Christian Soldiers. In the Assemblies of God, we had a program for children called Boys and Girls Missionary Crusade. In recent years, the song Onward, Christian Soldiers was removed from hymnals because it was considered too militant, inappropriate, and ill-fitting to the Christian life and to the message of God's love for the world. In 2007, 58 years after BGMC began, the Assemblies of God actually rebranded the Boys and Girls Missionary Crusade to the new and more harmless name, Boys and Girls Missionary Challenge. Now, I was not invited to be a part of the committee to change the name, so I can only imagine the collective thoughts that concluded that the word challenge was more socially palatable than crusade. One could, however, make a reasonable guess that some were offended by the word crusade. To some, the word crusade simply was seen as too militaristic or too violent, too dangerous for young boys and girls. To others, perhaps they wanted to clearly distance BGMC from the controversial history of the Christian Crusades. No way did we want our young children to grow up believing that Assembly of God missionaries were armed crusaders attempting to banish Muslims from Jerusalem. Perhaps there was some that imagined an evangelistic benefit from making certain there was no perceived connection between our missionaries and the Knights Templar. What I'm about to say may not fit the socially correct agenda that attempts to separate the realities of the Christian life from any perceived military thoughts or verbiage. But when the Apostle Paul says that the weapons we fight with have divine power to demolish strongholds, this is not symbolism. It is not allegorical. It is, my friends, reality. While I would agree that one could interpret these scriptures as symbolic, there indeed could be a convincing argument to do so. However, just because something can be done doesn't mean that it is best or most correct to do it. When you have seen what I have seen, when you have lived on the front lines of Christian pastoral ministry for 40 years, there is only one conclusion to be made. Spiritual warfare is real. There can be no doubt about it. If it were not so, then I would have to erase many events that are indelibly written into the story of my life. There truly is a life or death battle being fought in a spiritual realm that surrounds us. Now, why is anything I've just said important? Why does any of this matter? Let's go back to my fictional U.S. Navy SEALs. Their conversation about what they do and how they do it would be quite simply incomprehensible, too graphic for anyone else that lives and works apart from their very specialized world. While my story about them in a restaurant is fiction, the work they do is not. These men and women do exist, executing missions, following orders, prosecuting war, defending America in ways that we cannot even begin to imagine. Back in 2018, Joni and I visited a dear friend of ours in Hawaii. He is a United States Navy submariner. He has honorably and faithfully served our nation for 20 years. We had a most unique and special opportunity to privately tour the nuclear-powered submarine upon which he served, which was docked at Pearl Harbor. While inside that submarine, the officer that accompanied us explained the process for bringing Navy SEALs on board while submerged beneath the sea. I'm not sure I have words to explain it. I'm a wordsmith, and I struggle to come up with words. Impossible, dangerous, incredible, unbelievable comes to mind. My thoughts went from, "You can't be serious," to, "Where in the world do you find men willing to do this?" These men and women are heroes, brave heroes, my friends. They live in a world we cannot even begin to imagine. They go to work each day performing tasks the likes of which we cannot begin to understand. In the same way, there are real spiritual warriors that fight very real battles. There are heroes confronting very real enemies on unseen spiritual battlefields. Spiritual warfare is not symbolism. It just isn't. When these warriors speak to one another about the realities of their mission, casual listeners might struggle to understand. And all of this brings me to the word I would like to share with you today. Paul's 2 letters to Timothy, recorded for us in the Bible, are letters from one warrior to another. We are privileged to get a private look at a secure communication from an experienced retiring senior commander to a junior officer serving on the front lines of the battle to rescue lost men and women. With this in mind, let's look at 2 Timothy chapter 1. Paul, who knows that his time on this earth is coming to its conclusion, instructs Timothy to fan into flame the gift of God that is in him through the laying on of hands. The battle-scarred commander is instructing the junior officer to get the weapons of his warfare ready. Take your weapon, your spiritual gift, out of the weapons locker. Make sure that it is clean, properly lubricated, loaded, and fully functional. In chapter 4, he says, "Do not neglect the gift you have, which was given to you when the council of elders laid their hands on you." Hidden here is the phrase of importance for our thoughtful consideration today. He warns Timothy, do not neglect the gift. You and I could read past this 100 times without a second thought, unless we understand the significance of who these two men really are. If we do not fully respect the mission they are on, if we don't understand what this must have felt like for both of them, an aging hero of the faith who had compiled an unmatched record of accomplishments, now felt the urgency of pouring into this much younger warrior sage advice, wisdom, warnings, and commands. This letter was written while Paul was imprisoned in Rome. Think of him as a prisoner of war. He realizes that he will most likely never step onto another active battlefield. He will never plant another church. He will never publicly contend for the gospel. By the time his second letter to Timothy was sent, Paul knows that his death is imminent. In this second and final letter to Timothy, Paul has only one remaining opportunity to communicate the most important and heartfelt lessons which he believed were needed to keep Timothy both safe and engaged in the battle for souls. And he says, do not neglect your gift, your weapon. Do not neglect your gift. Go now to the final paragraph of 1 Timothy chapter 1, where Paul writes, This charge I entrust to you in accordance with the prophecies made about you, in accordance with the specific gifts that were given by the laying on of the hands of the elders, that by them you wage the good warfare. Now, with all seriousness of head and heart, again, understanding that this is wartime communications between two of God's most notable and valiant warriors. Let's continue and look lastly at verse 19 and 20. Here, Paul names names and says, there are some who have rejected the call to serve in this battle. They have gone AWOL. They have rejected the battle for souls. They have scorned both the gospel of Jesus and the orders given to them by the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. They have insulted the invitation to serve, and in doing so have shipwrecked their faith. They have shipwrecked their lives, which horribly leads to one final conclusion. They have been handed over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. I realize that these are some very hard words, but remember, they were not intended to be heard by someone sitting at a nearby table at the local diner. These are serious words for serious warriors contending on a very real battlefield for the sake of lost souls. These words, when understood in consideration of everything else we have learned today, can only lead us to one final conclusion. The number one cause of shipwrecked lives is, are you ready? It is, in a single word, neglect. The neglect of God's call upon our lives, the neglect of His word, the neglect of His gifts. Neglecting these things will not end well. It will lead to shipwrecked lives. Lives that are now scattered across the reefs of neglect. Wow, what an important lesson this is. May it encourage us to renew our dedication to God's call and purpose for our lives. If you wonder, if you have questions, does God really have a plan and a purpose for my life? Perhaps you once served God, but something happened, something went wrong, and now you worry that perhaps you have fallen too far away from the Lord. My friend, I am living proof that if you worry about this, if you even ask the question, then you have not fallen too far. The Lord stands fully prepared to rescue you from the reefs of neglect, to restore you and reinstate you once again into His service. My friends, if you have questions, contact us at encounterstudiosfl@gmail.com. We would love to help you reach your fullest potential in Jesus. We would be honored to meet you sometime soon at the Encounter Church tent located in Wildwood, Florida, which is located within the greater community known as the Villages, Florida. Thanks again for listening to Encounter Life. And remember, we believe that one encounter with Jesus can change everything.